Before we get into painting our bird model, I want to go over UVs. So UVs are the two-dimensional coordinates that map textures to your three-dimensional objects. So let me show you how this works. I'll start with a cube here. And we have under our modeling menu set, we have UVs. And I'm gonna, with my object selected, go to my UV editor. And here you see the default UVs as they're laid out. And it's pretty easy to see or to understand how they're laid out with something like a cube. We're basically almost unwrapping the cube, unwrapping the faces of the cube and laying them out flat within a 1x1 grid coordinates here, okay? And you can see actually if we right click, we have the same basic component modes that we can work in. So if I go to face here and highlight these faces, you can see which faces correspond to which faces on the model. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to assign a new material by right clicking and going assign new material. I'll assign just an Arnold standard surface shader to my model, and let me make this a little bit smaller, maybe collapse this UV toolkit, just so we're able to see the UVs, also our object and our attribute editor. If I go to, there's a lot of, as I think I've already mentioned, and maybe some of the first tutorials, there are a number of textures that are standard with Maya, default textures here. And remember, if I click this little checker box, I'm attaching a texture node or attaching a file node to this particular channel in our material node. So in our material node, under the color channel, I'm going to attach one of these default textures. So maybe I'll do something like the checker texture. Now I don't see it applied here because I'm in the wrong viewing mode here. I'm in the shading mode, just smooth shaded, but I need to actually, and where would it be here? Let's see, under 6. If I press 6 on my keyboard, now my textures show up, okay? So remember that 5 is just shaded mode, 6 is textured, and 7 is textured with lights, but we don't need lights. I just want to show you the way that this texture is now applied and laid out across this model and how it's based on the UVs. So it's a little hard to see. If I go back to object view, maybe we can, we still can't really see the faces. So let's see if I select them in my UV editor, go to face mode, and let me just select all of them. Now you can see how they're laid out. And I actually can scale or move these UVs and it will change the overall appearance of the way this texture is applied to the surface of our model. So I use the same hotkeys here of move, rotate, or scale. And if I hit move and I start to move the UV of this box, you can see on the model how it's shifting the texture, how the texture is applied. I can do the same thing with rotate this model around. And you can see how the texture is changing, its application on the model. And then also scale. So something to know about texture is that this texture will repeat over every one of these boxes. It's just showing you here. And so you can make your UVs larger than that single 1x1. Okay, so that's how UVs are applied. We can do a number of things to modify UVs. First thing I can do is there's ways to generate UVs here. You can do automatic. And so the best thing to do is, like, depending on what your model is, there's a bunch of different ways that we can do it. But let's just go ahead and say automatically place the UVs. And now we have a different setup. And what it's doing is, you can see here, we have these kind of planes where it's taking an image of the model. Let's go ahead and actually, let's delete this object and let's do something like a sphere and see what a sphere would look like. I have a sphere. This is what a sphere's default UVs look like. So if I go ahead and apply, let's see if I can apply that existing texture, which was that standard surface shader that I just added that texture 2. Here it is. And if I go ahead and say UVs, and let's do an automatic UV placement here, now you see that we have our spheres broken up in a way that's a little bit more legible to see it as a sphere, but it's they're kind of component parts here. So that's one way. We can also, that's automatic. We also have the possibility of doing a best plane, which means that I just choose a face, I believe, and hit return. And now from that particular perspective, it will map the UVs like this. You can see that. Let's go ahead and start to highlight some of these where it's really stretching, that these particular faces are really collapsed and distorted. So the texture will distort along those sides there with this best plane. Go back to my object mode. And we can do camera based. So again, just exactly from where our camera is pointing at, our perspective camera is pointing at our object and it's laying it in a similar fashion. Another one would be like spherical. And spherical allows you to lay them out. And this might work best for a sphere, right? You can see here that this is, and you can pull these tabs and try to really line it up. So spherical might be a way that we can best map a sphere. It's kind of taking a cylindrical view of this sphere and laying out the UVs as such. At the top, it looks a little bit strange, perhaps. But again, this is, we're trying to map a kind of, here we're mapping a checker pattern on a sphere. So you have to, whenever you're laying out UVs, you have to be aware of, you know, of kind of trying your best to make something that's 3D, basically wrapping it with something that's 2D. So there, you're going to have to just find ways, and especially if you're animating something, maybe we won't even see the top of that and it won't be an issue. So you have to, you know, kind of make adjustments and pick whatever's kind of the best, whatever works the best. Might not work perfectly. There's also, so that was cylindrical, excuse me, but we have spherical too. Spherical is like a sphere. So cylindrical was that cylinder. And then here, I'm just, again, using these little indicators here to change the layout of these UVs and thus change the texture. Okay, so something like that looks good. It looks okay. You can see here that these are where these faces at the top, and we kind of get a, this is a pretty intuitive looking UV layout, you know. And I might need to just scale it here along this edge. But you can see this white edge is going to be the edges of our UVs, even though we have to unwrap this somehow. Within the editor itself, we have some tools. And if I work with, like, let's say vertice mode, you can see that these vertices are connected. And what we can do, and I think we can do it with vertice mode, we might have to do it with edge mode, but you can like cut and sew these vertices together. So you can say, well, these two, I actually want them to connect. And then we can maybe like move this back where it was. Okay, and now we have something that maybe that's fixed. Okay, so we're able to like select faces just to show you. Okay, I can select a bunch of faces and I can cut them apart from the group, although that edge is still connected. Let's see, I should be able to pull them apart. There we are, right? So let me select this again and just pull these faces away. So these faces are going to be connected and they're going to distort along the vertices and edges that are connected. But here they, I've cut them, so I've disconnected them. Now I can go ahead and I can sew them back together. And, you know, it's going to bridge that, that divide that was there. Okay, but these are just ways that you can manipulate UVs. And then you have move and sew, which might have been a better option, right? So I might say move and sew. And I might want to move it here. So I might say edge for move and sew. Let me select these edges. I can select them here. You see the red is showing me where the edges are, where they have a relationship on the model. And let's just say move and sew. It's moving and sewing just those because all of these are kind of independent faces. Okay. So I might want to do that and then also select all of these other edges. And now say move and sew, although these edges are now selected, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, let's deselect these. And again, it's kind of like finessing your model. Now let's say move and sew. Okay, great. Now they're all back together. Okay, so that's some of the basics of using the UV editor and laying out UVs. Using these automatic UV methods. So there'll always be a default UV, but if you're going to be applying textures to your model, it's good to lay them out in a manner that that makes the most sense for whatever texture you're using and the way that your model looks. So you can use these. You can also create UVs. Let me just show you one more trick. And this trick is, let's see. Let's use this cylinder for a second. Let me add some more subdivision height. And let's just see what it looks like if I lay out these UVs with automatic. Let's look at our UV editor. Okay, and maybe that works, but what if I wanna, I might wanna have more control over how these UVs are laid out. So what I can do, and I think this looks, pretty good, but what I could do is I can select, and let me use this paintbrush mode. I'm going to deselect everything. And then I'm going to use the paintbrush mode to select a number of faces here. Let me see if I can select like half the model. Hopefully it's not painting on the back side. We'll find out. And then maybe I'll select individual faces by hitting Shift, and that plus sign comes up, and getting rid of some of these. Let me see. Let's go over here and get rid of some of this extra. Okay, now let me go to this side of the model. I see, okay. So I want basically half and half. There, and I'll select this. So now half my model's been selected. And what I can do is, let me go ahead and create, and I would create a quick select set. And this is something you can do with your model. I'm just gonna say like left half and say okay. And now I'm going to see if I can select the other half. I hit Shift so that it would get rid of all of these on this side, and now select the other half of the model. And I'm going to create another quick select set, and I'm going to say right. Okay. So now under my select, I have quick select sets here. I have the left, and this allows me to quickly choose which side. Now what I can do is say I want just to generate UVs automatic on one side. And then I can select the other. And this might not be important for this particular model, but let's say you have a body or a face or something, and you want to select both sides of the model in order to create the UVs. You want to select the head maybe separately. You can use this method of quick select sets so that you are selecting all the faces that you want to then automatically generate. You want to apply that automatic UV generation. Let's see, what do I do? I did left, and then I'll do right. Let's see. So that you could do that automatic UV generation for just part of your model. But to create these quick select sets first, you make sure that you have all of your model is accounted for. All the faces in your model are accounted for basically. Let's say the left, and now let's do the same. UV, automatic, okay? So maybe now, now I can really see what's going on here. I have the bottom half here, top half here, and now maybe I want to sew these together. So let's go to my edge mode. One, select these edges, these two, and let's say move and sew. Okay, now that's together. And same thing here, select these two and say move and sew. Now they're on top of each other, but in my model, I can maybe go ahead and paint my selection there. And in my UV editor, move them out of the way. Okay. And now I have the same here. I have these two sides. And I can overlap them as well, although it's not great practice to overlap your UVs, but you can do it. But now I've generated UVs myself using this method that makes it just easier to see where they're laid out, and it gives me greater control. Okay, so that's how you map out UVs. And then again, if I apply a texture here, let's go ahead and assign a new material. We'll do a standard surface shader again. And I'll put let's put a noise map on this one. Okay, now I have a kind of noise map. And you can see where that line is, but you know, we can go ahead and adjust where those UVs are located in order to minimize the kind of distortions. That's what the whole point of UVs are, like how this particular two-dimensional texture is going to be laid out on our model.